Hello and good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. That is aimed to give you a deeper understanding of hyper-converged infrastructure and an introduction to VMware's hyper-converged infrastructure software solution. So presenting the webinar today, we have Paul Hargreaves from VMware, and once Paul's finished, I'm also going to pass over to Peter Wickham from Bytes.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Paul Hargreaves. I'm from VMware. I'm one of the pre-sales technical team, obviously dedicated to hyper-converged and vSAN as a storage technology. And hopefully you can see that okay. Just minimize that all down.
Yeah, that's fine.
Great, perfect. We love technology. Okay, so first thing is that, as I'm sure you're aware, we've gone from an environment where people just want to do things to having to have IT involved in every conversation. And that was great when IT was very simple, but IT has become extremely complicated. And part of that is because IT decisions that were made several years ago around certain technologies that were chosen or ways of implementing them are now constraining the sort of things that people want to do. So the business might want a request for some sort of type of performance or capabilities, and IT has to then go off and try and figure out how to make that work, and that can be long and painful and not fun. So when we think about that, we look at the sort of customers who use these sort of technologies, and people originally thought that hyper-converged was only going to be good for the sort of really small use cases. So I thought I'd start with a sort of a customer who's doing something a little bit different. So here's Airbus. They obviously have a lot of planes. One of the things that they do with these planes is they collect a lot of sensor data. And this isn't the sort of sensor data that says something has failed or not. This is the, a wheel is wobbling at a certain rate. And when they analyze it later on, they're looking for trends over several runs to see when the maintenance crew go and look at it, what needs to happen? Do they need to tighten it? Is it okay? Do they need to keep an eye on it? A bit like when you go to the dentist and they keep wash on certain teeth. If you've been bad as I have as a child, you get the same sort of thing. Now, each time the plane sits on the ground having maintenance done to it, it costs them an absolute fortune because they can't fly, which means they can't service the customers, which means unhappy customers, etc., etc. And they work out that it costs them about $25,000 an hour to keep the plane on the floor. So anything that they can do to speed things up makes life much better for them. And so what they've done is they chose hyper-converged. They put all of this sensor data as they collect it into a hyper-converged environment and process it. Now, they could have chosen other technologies. The reason that they chose hyper-converged is that as they need to scale, it makes it very, very easy for them. So as they increase the number of planes they've got, they can just add more service to the environment, and that increases the overall performance that they get. Or as they start doing different types of analytics, they can just add more service to the environment, and that will increase the amount of performance that they get. So what is hyper-converged? So on the left is what most customers have, the sort of traditional environments, which is a 3-tier architecture, which consists of, at the top, some compute with VMware typically, and then in the middle, some sort of storage networking, and then at the bottom, the actual storage devices. And the whole point of hyper-converged is basically to squash those three things together and eliminate the need for the bottom two, so that they're basically part of the same compute layer. So in this case, we would have a storage layer and a storage networking layer, but they're all built into the compute. And that makes life a lot simpler because you haven't got separate devices to manage, you haven't got separate things to look at, and in general, it just makes life a lot easier. And in terms of things like costs, it's generally going to be a lot cheaper. And it also gives different scalability options because you can scale things in a much simpler way. And another nice thing is that this is built on industry standard servers, so HP servers, Dell servers, whatever. Hyper-converged basically means that you can just use whichever technology is available to you for the environment. So in terms of the market, this is the fastest part of the storage market. It's now about 36% of the storage market in total, and it's growing very, very quickly. And the reason it's growing very, very quickly is that customers are realizing that when they come to do their next large array refresh, that they've got different options now. And so they're looking and saying, well, which one is going to cost less? and which one's going to give me the most amount of features going forward or the most amount of flexibility going forward, and then they're voting with their feet. So part of the conversation is around cost and around scalability. Now, typically when people buy traditional storage systems, they look for a 3 or 5 year payback window. Usually it's 5 years. Sometimes people want to stretch it to even more than that because these devices are so expensive. And they're also very lumpy. When you buy them, you basically buy typically all of the storage and everything up front, and then you sort of hope that you've bought enough, because going back to the business and saying, I want another £500,000 or whatever, can be an exciting conversation. So there's a lot of planning around deciding to go buy or refresh, and there's a lot of conversation around actually making that transition over, which typically takes a long amount of time. And then you normally, that's what you bought, and you're I won't use the term stuck with it, but that's how the environment's going to look now for a considerable amount of time. So everybody bundles in extra just to make sure that they don't need to go back to the business and ask for more. Well, the whole purpose of Hyper-Converged is to sort of break out of that. Rather than buying 5 or 7 years worth of equipment up front and disk drives that in 5 years' time will look completely different and will be obviously a lot cheaper on a per terabyte basis, with Hyper-Converged, the recommendation is that you buy what you need for now. So you buy maybe a year, maybe 18 months worth of equipment. And then over time, just add more servers with disks inside them into the environment. So just scale out. That adds a couple of advantages. The first one being that it means that you're buying the technology as you need it rather than buying it at all up front. So you're getting it at the new price of whatever it is, plus with the new generation of technologies that are in there, the new disk drives or whatever. And you're also typically going to buy much less in terms of cost. So it's usually a lot easier in terms of getting purchase orders through the business and having the business conversation that would go along with it. So it's generally very easy to scale out this way rather than having to do everything in one big bang up front. So in terms of customers, we've got lots of customers. We've got over 14,000 now, and we've got them in every single market of every single use case you can think of. So everything from government through to manufacturing, through to retail, hospitals, you name it, we've got machines in there running workloads. And we're running every single type of workload you can think of, all the way from it's a small robo environment or a backup target, all the way through to this is my production environment that's running my business. We're running everything in every market you can think of. And it's growing. So again, as I said earlier, we're growing because customers are realizing that this is a new way of doing things that will actually add a lot of value to the business. So what are the sort of advantages that you can see here? Well, typically when deploying a new technology in environment, there's risk. And so we want to make sure that there's as little risk as possible. So we use the term evolve without risk, and the reason being is that you've already probably got the technology internally, you're just not using it yet. So vSAN is already included as a technology level with all the vSphere that's out there. So every single version of vSphere since 5.5 has already had all the components of vSAN in there, and it's just a case of adding the disk drives and the right licenses to turn it on. So going from an environment that doesn't have vSAN to going to an environment with vSAN is typically very painless, because it is literally just a case of adding disk drives or buying servers with the right sort of disk drives and then buying the right sort of licenses to enable the features. And that makes life really simple when you're moving from a traditional environment into this new world. In terms of cost, so the TCO is lower. Partly it's because you don't have to manage these sort of old legacy systems, which cost a lot of money to look after. Also, it's the CapEx. So the disk drives that go inside a server are typically cheaper than the ones that would go inside a storage array. And again, that all adds up to save a lot of money. And then it's all about being able to be prepared for changes in the future. So by being able to buy new technology as it comes along, at the time it comes along, rather than having to wait 4 or 5 years each time for a massive refresh, means that you can take advantage of the new technologies quicker. So an example would be when HP released the Synergy boxes, I don't know, 18 months ago or so. We were ready on day one of them being available to basically start using vSAN. So vSAN storage was ready for them extremely quickly. And we think that vSAN is the best storage for vSphere. So everyone's using vSphere. We think this is the best storage technology for it because it's deeply integrated into it. So every server that can run vSphere and has the right hardware components for things like the disk drives will be able to run this, which is a lot of different vendors. We're going to take all of the disks, so all of the disks inside the machine, and we're going to bring them all together to make them look like one environment for the administrators. And then we're going to basically give them the ability to control this through the tools that they're used to using, which is vCenter. So it makes it really, really easy to deploy, really easy to make choices about hardware types and which disks to put in there, and then very easy to manage it on a day-to-day basis. So why do people pick vSAN? So sometimes people think that they want one thing or another thing, and so we let everybody pick what options they wanted. And it turns out that unfortunately the reduced admin workload is only at 4%, which I was really disappointed about when I saw it. For some reason, the business doesn't care that admins are busy. I don't know why that is, but hey, that is just what it is. In terms of the things that businesses really care about, though, it's that on the left, the lower TCO, and having simpler management obviously increases the TCO, or decreases the TCO, sorry. But there's also other reasons, those things on the right. So wanting to avoid SAN upgrades, wanting to get better performance. Again, people adopt this technology for every single use case we can think of. And in a lot of cases, it ends up being cost that's the initial driver. And one of the things we tell customers is that if they want to do some transformation inside the business, then use vSAN as the first step, because that will usually free up a lot of money that they can use to then go and do something else. You know, maybe transform their networking infrastructure or start to move some applications into the cloud. This enables that to happen. So I said every single workload. So most people thought initially that HyperConverged was going to be for the small workloads or maybe VDI. Actually, the majority of customers using vSAN are using it for mission critical, business critical applications. So SQL Server, Oracle, SAP, those sort of workloads absolutely are run. In fact, we've now got HANA certification for SAP, so we've basically got the highest level of application certification you can think about. But we're also being used for every other workload, such as test and development environments. Sky TV are one of our large customers who started using us for test and development and then moved into using us for everything. All the way through down to things like remote offices or VDI workloads, or having us as a cost-effective disaster recovery infrastructure, where instead of changing the production environment, maybe it's not time because of you've just bought maybe some traditional storage, deploying us with vSAN as the disaster recovery option, again, saves some money that you can then use somewhere else. When you're then ready, you can then switch the production environment over to vSAN as well. So it plays very nice in those sort of workloads. So when thinking about what the users do, what the administrators do, we wanted to make life a lot simpler for them. So right now, in a traditional environment, you'd have to go off and maybe ask someone to create a LUN for you, and then you have to have the debate about how big the LUN should be. And none of this is exciting stuff. I was doing this 20 years ago when I first started getting into storage. And the Oracle admin would say, I need 1 terabyte of storage, and then you go and look 2 years later and you'd find that we're using 100 gigabit because they had no idea up front what they needed. And part of the problem with deploying technology that way is it's thinking about the infrastructure first and then working the way up to the application. Whereas we think that it's better to have the business think more about what it wants and then translate that through to what the underlying technology does at the end of it. So for example, we have this capability called policies, where someone basically says, right, I want a gold policy that looks like this, with these sort of rules, with this level of protection, with this amount of capacity involved in it, and things like that. Someone defines that policy in vCenter, in the management tool, and then they apply it to the virtual machines. And then we, as vSAN, figure out where to put that data. So we'll move things around, we'll make it fit that policy. The nice thing is that you can then change the policy. So let's say, for example, you started out with a dev test workload for a user who was doing some development work for the business. So you say to them, right, okay, I'm going to give you 1 copy of the data and I'm going to protect it and this is the type of protection. It's going to be very low priority because it's not important to the business at the moment. And then you discover 3 months later that that's now running production because the user didn't bother telling you, and it's running production for a massive part of the business and is really, really critical. Well, what you can do is just go and change the policy, and we will go then protect the virtual machine in the way that the policy says. So, for example, you could move it from a silver policy where the virtual machine had 1 copy to a gold policy where it had 2 or 3 copies. And that is literally just a right click and a change, and then we do all the things underneath under the covers to make that happen. And that's completely non-destructive, so you don't have to shut things down, and you can change your mind. So that's the nice thing, you can change your mind as the business requirements change over time, or we add new features that mean you can use different technologies in a different way. So we think that this use of policies is much more valuable than just saying, well, I'm creating a RAID array, I'm creating a LUN, I'm passing a LUN up to an application that can then do whatever LUNs do, sort of thing. That's not particularly interesting to most people. Another thing is about the day-to-day management. So I've yet to have a conversation with anybody from any vendor where they'll say, yeah, we're really, really hard to install. Yeah, this takes us weeks. We're really painful. So everybody in the industry has that day zero installation part sorted. What most people don't have, though, is the migration piece into the environment. That can be something that when you're typically buying a new storage array will take 6 months to a year to migrate everything off the old storage array onto the new one. And it's not because the technologies are slow. It's usually because there's a lot of planning and interactions and backup things that all need to happen at the same time and change that make it complicated and painful and less easy to do. So what we've tried to do is, again, make it as painless as possible. So migration into the environment is a vMotion or a storage vMotion. You just bring the data in. And because it's in a virtual machine, at that point, you can move it around in the infrastructure. And if you decided later on, so 3 years from now, you decided that another technology was better, you can just vMotion the data back out again. So getting into this environment and getting out of it again is very, very simple. There's no lock-in, there's none of that sort of thing. In addition, we're also sitting there doing things like health checks. So a common sort of failure used to be that a disk drive would fail. And you go to the vendor who provided the disk drive and you say, right, the disk's failed, can I have a new one? And they go, actually, we don't have this disk drive anymore. We'll just send you another type of disk drive that's slightly better. Thank you very much. And what would happen is the new disk drive would get plugged in and we'd go, that's not certified anymore. And nobody would notice because, of course, that's just how life is. So what we've done is we've added health checks in there, and these health checks check all the time as disks get added and removed, as the environment changes, or as we discover things about the environment that we can then push down to those machines that allow us to basically say, right, look for this signature, look for this issue, and report it to the administrators. And then the administrators will get a view of this, which they'll see through either their local vCentre if they want to, or they can get an email or whatever where we got the ability. And in fact, we used that very recently to push out a critical notice, which was like, everybody, please upgrade to this version because of this reason. It makes life very, very simple for administrators to then not hit known issues later on, which again is a typical thing in most environments, is that you generally find that they deploy on day one and then never touched again. And we want to get people out of that cycle. We want to get people in the environment where they're not scared to touch things because if upgrading, it's going to break. We want them to know that things can be upgraded, it's going to be safe to upgrade, and therefore they do those upgrades. And we'll do everything from performance management, diagnostics and everything like that as well. And again, it's optional, but we have a lot of our customers sending us data up to the cloud. And the data that goes into the cloud is anonymized with the anonymization maps kept locally, so we don't see them, they actually stay at a customer site. And then that enables us to basically look at the infrastructure over time and say, so whenever a support call comes in, for example, where the user goes, something's happened, usually what happens is the call comes in and the user goes, something happened, and we go, what changed? And the user goes, nothing. And we go, okay. And we can then look back over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 days of data to say, actually, somebody logged in, it was this user here. You can go look in your local mapping to figure out who that user is. They changed this option, which caused this thing to happen, which then caused the problem that you're now seeing. So it makes it very easy to see over time what's happening in an environment and do diagnosis, rather than having to do the whole, can you upload a log bundle to me? Let me have a look at that. Okay, we've no idea because whatever it is has fallen off the end of the logs. So this sort of serviceability, this sort of capability is built into vSAN. This one's a funny one. So as of the last two major versions of vSphere and vCenter, we're now fully supporting HTML5. And in fact, the version that we shipped probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago is now completely HTML5. There's no need anymore to go back into the old web interface, which we called Flex internally. We're now fully beautiful, very easy to manage. And so customers who are holding on to 5.5 with their fingernails because they didn't want to use the 6.0 web interface can now completely skip that and go straight to the new HTML5 interface, which, like I say, has been out now for 2 major versions and is very, very good. It's a lot simpler to manage, and it pretty much runs with every browser you can think of. So there's no less I've got to install Flash or have any of the pain that goes along with non-web browser sort of interfaces. It also makes it very easy for people transitioning from older legacy environments because they can get to the new environment. It takes them a few hours to figure out where things have moved to, but then it's very, very simple from that point on. Upgrades. So I talked a second ago about upgrades being one of those things that people don't like doing. So we've spent a lot of our time thinking about how to do upgrades the right way. And one of the things we're trying to do with vSAN is basically do whole stack. So we're looking at the whole stack of the environment, everything from the BIOS of the machine down to drivers for network cards through to custom things that are sent via the different vendors through to whatever's inside the HBAs inside the machine, all those sort of hardware components that are in there, and also the software that we run on top of it as well. Now, right now, we have the ability to upgrade for a lot of manufacturers, the disk controllers and the disks themselves, so we can actually go and update those. And we're working with the vendors to do the rest of it. And what this means, though, is that as you run the update manager tool, it will sit there and say, right, okay, I can see there's a new version of vSphere available. Maybe it's a patch, maybe it's a full-blown version. It'll look at the hardware that it sees and it'll say, right, you with the version that you've got can just upgrade. So it will then orchestrate the upgrade when the administrator says that's okay. Or it can say, actually, I need the new custom version of maybe HP's drivers for this card that you have in the machine. So please go download those and install them. And then we will then take over and say, right, now you're ready to do the upgrade. Or we can look at the environment and say, actually, because the versions of the hardware that you've got in there won't take the new version, we can actually say, I can do a bit of an upgrade or maybe upgrade some drivers or whatever, but we'll keep you at a safe level that we know that everything works and is certified and qualified. So there's no more of this, I'm going to do an upgrade and I'm not quite sure what the end result's going to be that you get with traditional environments, where we will look at this stack and go, actually, we know that this is safe. We know this is tested. We can take you from where you are to where you need to get to, and we can do that all for you. So we're doing a lot of that already. And like I said, in the latest version, we're doing disk controllers and disks. And like I say, we're working with the other vendors to do the rest of the pieces as quickly as we can. Next is the operational management side of things. So we have vCenter, which is the day-to-day, I'm making changes in the environment or just doing some brief monitoring. We also have the vRealize piece, which is the whole environment view, which is the long-term business view of the environment. And obviously, because it's made by the same manufacturer, we've got very deep links into here. So part of it is that vRealize is now fully integrated into vCenter so that you can basically see a whole view from within vCenter without having as an admin to jump around between different tools. So that makes life easy for them. But also we've started adding the vSAN pieces in, even if a customer hasn't gone and bought vRealize yet. So if you haven't yet started deploying vRealize and haven't paid for it, most of the versions of vSAN that you can license will include part of vRealize so that you can then start getting the long-term trends and capabilities that come along with that. So anyone who wants to do long-term capacity analysis, or I want to look back at performance from a year ago, we don't keep that data inside the normal vSAN environment. That actually would then live inside this database here so that you can then do those long-term trends. And it means that you can look at different parts of the environment in different ways, all through, both vSAN and the non-vSAN environments through the same interface. So again, it makes life really, really simple for administrators to go back to the business and give them pretty graphs and all the things that they need to make sure that they're seeing the value out of the environment. But also, as customers realize, and as you start to use vRealize and see what the vSAN piece is, you might then discover that actually this is right for your business and that you can use it for the rest of your infrastructure. And if so, then licensing it again is very simple. And it will then start to do things like look at the entire environment for performance and say, right, okay, if I move these workloads from these machines here to these machines here, you're going to be able to decommission those old ones. It'll increase the amount of money you can save on them. Or you'll get more performance because those workloads are tied to old hardware that's slowing them down. So it'll start to do that performance optimization, and it can do some of that automatically if you want it to. And then it can also then say, right, okay, what's it costing you to run these workloads, so that you can then start to decide, again, whether or not they're the right things to run or the right things to run on the equipment that you put them on. And then it can start to do remediation. So it can start to say, hey, we keep noticing this issue is happening. Well, wouldn't it be nice if you remediated it so that it stopped happening? Well, maybe we will move these workloads around. Maybe we will make some changes to the environment. Maybe we'll show you every environment that you've got in there so that you can pick off the most important ones first, the ones that are flashing red, so that you can then go fix those rather than getting bogged down with the, well, which interface do I log into first to decide where I'm going to spend my time. So vRealize will do all of those things for you and basically make it a lot easier to manage a large estate. So to make life simple, we've got HCI Kits. And these HCI Kits are a bundle of vSphere and vSAN, and in some cases, vCenter in the smallest case. In other cases, the vRots tools to, again, give you lots of different options here, along with just being able to buy discrete licenses. If you're building a new environment from scratch, then sometimes having the kit makes it easier. Also, the kits are discounted. So right now, there's a 20% price discount on the kits, which come with the components in there. So don't worry about what they are. It's very easy to find these out, and Bytes will definitely help you there. But we have these kits designed to basically make it really easy to consume the technology and just order all of the things that you need, and also potentially save a substantial amount of money. So as I said earlier, you're just a step away from using HyperConverged because you've already got the technology in-house. You're just not using it yet. So it is just a case of adding new disks, adding new controllers potentially, or adding new servers that have those components in there, and then turning on a license. And it is no more difficult than that. And because this is built into vSphere, it means that there's no change to the ecosystem. So, for example, if you were using Veeam for your backup infrastructure or NetBackup for your backup infrastructure, neither of them will need to know that there's vSAN sitting underneath. They'll both just continue to back up the virtual machines as they were doing before. So there's no change to the infrastructure from an ecosystem perspective, or antivirus, or all the other technologies that you typically would run in an environment. It makes it really, really easy to go deploy them. Because this is the same software you're already running, this is just vSphere. There's no new software to install. So you don't go along and install a new piece of vSAN software in the environment or have to install virtual machines that run it. This is just part of vSphere, and it's just a case of going into the vCenter screen and turning on the license for it. There's no new management tools. So you don't, if the administrators are used to using vCenter, then they will just go into the vSAN tab and continue to manage the environment in exactly the same way. There's no jumping between different tools to go and figure out what the environment's doing. All the logs, all alerts, all issues are all pushed in through vCenter, again, to make life simple, and then vCenter links in with vRealize to give you that longer term view if you want it. And unlike other HCI vendors, you don't need to look at or change the vendor of servers that you're currently using. So if you're happy with the server vendor you're using, you can continue to use them. You're not forced down one road or another. Now, of course, that makes life really, really simple, because if you are, let's say you're using a lot of HP DL380s, then you can just continue to buy DL380s and deploy this sort of technology on top of them. So I realized that was a whistle-stop tour. Hopefully that was useful to you. I'll say thank you very much at this point, and I'll hand over to Peter to talk around the HP offering.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks to Paul for that presentation and handing over to me. My name is Peter Wickham. I'm the Business Development Manager for Hewlett-Packard Enterprise here at Bytes. I work in the Vendor Solutions team. So predominantly I have responsibility for storage and servers, and the server piece brings me rather neatly onto Ready Nodes. So Ready Nodes are the recommended compute platform of choice to run vSAN. What is a Ready Node? First and foremost, a Ready Node is just a server. I know Paul's touched on this once or twice in his presentation, but it sort of bears stressing again. They are just normal servers. There is nothing weird and wonderful about them. You don't need any sort of bespoke new infrastructure to install it. They are just servers as you are used to. So a Ready Node, if you think of a Ready Node more as a term rather than a sort of defined product. So Ready Node is a term that VMware used to denote that the server in question is absolutely appropriate to run a particular or a specific vSAN workload. Again, as Paul alluded to a little bit earlier, whilst I'm coming at this from the point of view of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise, and HPE is Bytes' I would say, sort of go-to hardware partner of choice, other vendors are of course available. So most of the main server vendors are signed up to the Ready Node program. Dell, Cisco, Lenovo, I'm sure there's plenty others as well. So if you do happen to be fully bought into any of those particular vendors, there's nothing stopping you continuing with that. We would obviously like to think that we can point you towards HP Enterprise. We think HP has a fairly compelling story around their new Gen 10 ProLiant servers, some very, very neat, nice new functions, predominantly around security, firmware security, all of which we can provide information to you on request. So we think they're a very good fit for Ready Nodes. They come in a choice of form factors, as you might imagine. So you have choices of 1U, 2U servers, and blades, and then also Synergy as well. So from a HPE point of view, the 1U offering would be a DL360 Gen 10. The 2U offering would be a DL380 Gen 10. The trade-off between the two being the DL360 is obviously smaller form factor, so if you're constrained in your data central server room, then the DL360 may be a better fit if space is a problem. The DL380 2U form factor, obviously a little bit bigger, but will give you a great deal more expandability. So that's expandability from the PCI side, plenty more PCI slots, and the ability to go up to considerably more drive bays as well. So DL380 I think will go out to 24 bay. So they are your choices. I know that Paul mentioned a bit earlier that they run on any x86 platform. That has also slightly changed in relatively recent months, certainly on the HPE side. They now run on AMD as well. So you've got your DL360s and DL380s, which are running x86 processors, and they now have DL325s and DL385s, which are running AMD processors. So if you do have AMD in your environments and that's your preferred sort of compute choice, as it were, that option is there for you. On the blade side, it'll be based around BL460C Gen 10s. So sorry to load you with a whole load of numbers and letters and all the rest of it, but I'm sure some of you are fairly familiar with those models. Those models are the ones that host the Ready Node concept. So within the Ready Node range, you have a choice of all flash or hybrid. Now VMware have sort of rather handily and helpfully called the respective models the AF and the HY. Unsurprisingly, the AF is all flash, the HY is hybrid. They have several models within each range. So you've got an AF4, an AF6, and AF8 for the all flash, and a HY2, HY4, 6, and an 8. The only difference being the disk. So the all flash, the AF models will come with SSD drives for both your caching tier and your capacity tier. The HY models will have SSD flash drives for the caching tier, and then traditional spinning nearline SAS drives for the capacity tier. It's worth pointing out these are both absolutely certified by both vendors. So HPE and VMware have been working together on the ReadyNode project for at least a couple of years. So any builds that are part of this project are fully certified by both vendors. So if they say they will run a particular workload, they both certify that they run that particular workload as well. There is a sizing tool available. So the ReadyNode sizing tool is hosted on the VMware website. I'm sure all of you have logins to the VMware portal. It's available through there. So the link is on the slide, and obviously the presentation will be shared with you afterwards. So if you do want to go in and have a bit of play with it and configure away to your heart's content, you can do so. Sorry. And then lastly, the entire concept of ReadyNode is that they are a turnkey solution. So they are meant to be ready to use straight out of the box. The only thing that you would actually need to procure separately is the licenses. So you need to purchase the vSAN licenses through VMware as you normally would. When the boxes are delivered by HPE, there's no delivery charge as well, which is always a nice little bonus to have. Moving on to the next slide, this is a fairly dense slide, so don't worry too much about the actual details and the facts and figures and numbers. It's more just to give you an idea that there are various models in the range, and they are predominantly defined by the number of VMs you can run on each node and the amount of IOPS that you get per node as well. The other differences being the disk and the memory, as you would expect. So on the all-flash models that we have here, the AF4 will start off by giving you up to 30 VMs per node, and that goes up to the AF8, which gives you up to 120 VMs per node, and the IOPS figures go up accordingly as well. So 25, 50k, and then up to 80k on the AF8. I'll just flip over to the next slide, which is the same as the previous slide. Very easy for me to deal with, but basically it's the same model as before, except for the hybrid models. As you can see, the hybrids will give you less capable IOPS per node, as you would expect with the introduction of the spinning disk. But there is obviously a significant cost saving to be had there as you're using spinning disk in the capacity tier as opposed to SSD. So it is a bit of a trade-off, cost versus performance. You will obviously have a feel as to which is more important to you in your particular environments. You have the choice, so it is there for you if you need it. Okay, and the bombs, the actual configs that are certified by HPE and VMware, they are quite flexible, or they can be quite flexible. There are plenty of things you can change within the bill of materials. There are certain things you can't. So in terms of the CPU, yes, you can go for a better performing processor. You can, higher clock speed, more core count. The only restriction is that you stay within the family of processors that was originally on the original ReadyNode. So in the world of HP, if it's on a Gen 10 server, if it's a gold processor, then you need to stay as a gold processor. You just can't change over to a totally different generation of processors. Memory, as you might expect, you can increase. That's not a problem. You just can't go down. And then on the caching tier and the capacity tier, so the disk, yes, you can change it, but there is a certain ratio that needs to be followed between the two tiers. So if you change the capacity tier, you do need to make sure that you sort of review, check, and make sure that the caching tier is still going to give you what you need. You can obviously do things like adding in NICs. You do need a 10 gig NIC in the environment as a baseline, but you can add more. So that's just constrained by the form factor of the server that you're going for. So in HPE's world, DL380 2U server will give you a lot of expandability, lots of extra PCI slots and capability for more disk. The DL360 slightly less so. And then lastly, the boot device can be changed as well. So all of these configs will recommend that you do have a boot device for VMware booting. So that will be like an 8 gig micro SD flash card. You have the option to change that to dual 8 gig or 32 gigs. So as long as it stays one of the HPE recommended models, you're fine to change that as well. You of course can make other additions which don't affect the ready node concept. So in terms of things like support, you can add whatever support you think you need. So 4 hour on site, 24/7 for a year, if that's what you normally go for, or proactive care, 5 year, blah blah blah, whatever it is you think you need, the support is something you can decide on yourselves. So even though, and just to go back to the one thing that you can't really change on the configs, that's the controller, so the I/O. You do need to stay with the recommended RAID controller that the ready node config is telling you should go for. So broadly speaking, please don't try to put in LSI, whatever it is, some card that you're familiar with. That's the one part of the equation that does need to not be changed if you can possibly avoid it. So broadly speaking, even though you can make changes to the configs, I would personally say, as a general principle, it is preferable to stay as close to the bill of materials as possible, if only for simplicity. You really don't want to have to be going back through a recertification process if you're introducing, let's say, third-party disk or third-party memory. You may, of course, wish to do that for commercial reasons, but it does add an additional layer of complexity in terms of getting the product recertified. So as long as you don't mind doing that, the option is there, but we would always recommend that you stick as close to those configs as you possibly can. So moving on to the final slide on this particular piece, just the quoting and ordering side of it, so how it actually works in practice. Once you have decided on your ready node, so you've worked out, hopefully through the sizing tool, that you need, 3 HY4s in a resilient 3-node cluster, we will then work with our distribution partners to recreate the bill of materials and generate the XML files. You don't particularly need to know what XML files are, but they are an integral part of the process of submitting the build back into Hewlett-Packard Enterprise so that they can then work on the bids. So really that's all to do with going back to HPE and maximising your discounts and working that price down in your favour, which obviously we all want to do. We will then work with HP on your behalf to maximise those discounts through HP's bid process. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. Some of you may not be, but we will help you through that process if you need it, either through my team or your regular Bytes account manager. So once the order is placed on HP, so once they've received it and acknowledged it, and they've agreed that the build is clean, and it goes off to their factory. Their factory is in Eastern Europe, so Czech Republic, I believe it is, and the ETA from them receiving that order clean is 2 weeks, and they will deliver the boxes directly to you, as I mentioned before, free of charge, and those boxes will, in theory, be ready to use out of the box. Just to point out, Ready Node is not a brand in itself. So whenever you do order Ready Node, what you are actually going to physically receive is a normal HP server. And that concludes that part of the presentation. There is one additional slide which I'd like to touch on, slightly different concept to what I was talking about before, but it's a service that Bytes are currently offering called a Virtual Infrastructure Assessment, or VIA. I am going to refer to it as a VIA from here on in because virtualization infrastructure assessment is a bit of a mouthful. It is a tool that will allow you to understand and interrogate your own environments, basically to understand how your apps are running, how they're performing, with a view to finding out whether or not they will perform better on new infrastructure. So if you're looking at server refreshes, or if you've got sort of VM sprawl and you're looking to condense that down into something perhaps newer and giving you better performance, this tool will give you a lot of information on how to do that, how to better understand your own environment, and then also point you towards a suitable replacement that will hopefully give you more performance for less space, and then hopefully less cost. The VIA works on multiple environments, so it will work on virtual within vSphere, and it works on physical as well. So it's powered by Live Optics. Live Optics you may have come across before. If you haven't, that is the engine behind the VIA. Very solid company. They have a proven track record in this market. Their collector, the tool that actually goes off and gets the information, is called Optical Prime. It's important to point out it only runs on system memory. So there's no local installation involved. It doesn't make any modifications to either your system or the system from which it's collecting the data. And it's quick. It's very quick to set up. It's very simple to use, and probably lastly, most importantly, it's free. So it is something we can set up for you relatively straightforwardly. In terms of how quickly you get the results back out once the VIA has started, again, that is quite quick. So you'll start getting valid information back out of it within 24 hours, and we would estimate typically 24 to 48 hours to get a lot of meaningful information back out of the VIA. Due to the nature of how it installs, it won't and shouldn't affect your workloads or performance on your networks. So we would urge you to look at that. If you have projects on the go that you think may benefit from that, or even if you just need to better understand your own network for maybe you have consolidation products coming up a bit further down the line, there's no reason why you can't start looking at that now, and the VIA is an excellent tool to give you information about your environment. So there will be instructions on the partner feedback form, which is going to come out to you after this presentation. I would suggest that if you are interested in the VIA, you make a note of that on the form and get that back into us here at Bytes, and the appropriate person will then action that for you, or you can just talk to your regular Bytes account manager. They should all be aware of this. A lot of them have already run VIAs successfully with customers before, so if you have additional questions about how it works, what type of information you can expect to get out, and all of that good stuff, your Bytes account manager should be able to help. If they have questions they can't answer, they can loop straight into the specialists over here who work in the same team that I do, the vendor solutions team, and they will be more than happy to help you with that process. And that's everything from me this morning. So thank you very, very much for your time. I hope you've been able to gain some nuggets of interest out of it. I hope I haven't rambled on too long, but I will now pass you back over to Amy for the debrief. So thank you very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Paul, as well, for presenting. So as I mentioned at the beginning, we are going to hold a Q&A session now. So if you do have any questions, there is a questions box. If you just write your questions there, I'll read those out for Peter and Paul. And we do have our email address on the screen just there if you do want to submit any outside of the webinar. Let's just have a look, see if any's come through. So we've had a question here from David. He said, how much does a vSAN license cost? I already have a vSphere production support. So I think, Paul, maybe you'll probably agree, maybe we'll have to take that offline and get back to you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's worth noting that we license vSAN the same way that we license vSphere, so it's per CPU. So again, it doesn't matter how much storage you've got, whether it's 1 terabyte or a petabyte. We just care about the number of CPUs in the environment. But yes, in terms of actual pricing, definitely have a chat with Bytes afterwards, and they'll be able to give that to you.
Yeah, we'll be in touch, David. I'll send your details to the account manager and the VMware team as well. Thank you. Okay, so I don't think we've got any questions. So thanks again, Peter and Paul, for presenting, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining this webinar today, taking the time out of your busy days. As mentioned at the beginning, I will be sending you all a link to the recording, and I'll probably send that tomorrow. I'll try and do it this afternoon, but it will most probably be tomorrow. And there is a feedback form at the end, so if you would like any further information, please pop that in there. Any feedback just regarding the webinar would be great. And then if you are interested in the assessment that Peter mentioned, if you pop that in there, we will be back. We'll be in touch with you in the next few days. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day today. Thank you.